Hey everyone, welcome back to Triple F Shooting. Today, as you can see, we have got a hold of a Palmetto State Armory spiker. So, very cool. First thing we'll do, cool, nothing in it, and just for giggles, because it looks better. Alright, so these have been sort of hard to get a hold of. We got very lucky and had a friend of the channel loan this to us and let us run around with it. So far we have not abused it in any way that they would not have, so gun's holding up just fine. But how cool is this? It's an AK and it also does that, more or less. No. So, one fun thing about the spiker is they don't ship it with a cleaning rod. And if you try hard enough, you can get this thing real good and jammed up on said cleaning rod. So, your mileage may vary there. This cleaning rod was bought after the fact. And you do have to make sure it is all the way back, and it doesn't hold in there super great, so it can get in the way of that locking lug that you see out there. But all that stupidity aside, how cool is that? So you guys probably saw this in the AK versus M16 video that we did, Vietnam style, because this really fits the Vietnam AK bill, or at least for a price that you can actually touch. So let's get into what's the point. Like, why would you buy this? For me, and obviously for the person that bought it, it's just cool factor. You're not going to want to do a whole lot of super modernized furniture on this. You're not going to want to change much about it other than adding like a cheap Chinese style sling, because it's sort of a clone or copy of a Type 56 rifle. The Type 56 was produced by China and very heavily shipped and exported into Vietnam. Our troops would have been seeing a lot of this type of thing in combat. Now, the underfolder bayonet maybe wouldn't have been totally common, and then there's a couple other differences we'll get into that weren't super regular in the Vietnam era, but again, for the money, being able to have something that replicates this so well is very cool. So most people that are going to be interested in this at all are probably going to have some idea of Norinco AKs. So since the early 90s, Norinco AKs have been harder to get, and lately in this format, you're approaching $4,000 and $5,000. From PSA, you're getting this just under $1,000. They do a pretty good job of matching the look, all the way down to the Cerakote finish that sort of looks like bluing. We'll get into that. And you can have that spiker bayonet, again, for literally a fifth the price or fourth the price, depending upon where you're finding it. And you don't have to feel bad about shooting it, because it's a newly American-made piece that just looks like what you want it to look like. So let's jump into the features of the gun really quick, and as we're going through it, we'll kind of talk about the shooting characteristics and throw in some footage of that. But again, if you saw the AK versus M16 video, you've probably already got a little bit of info on this thing just from listening to me rant and rave about different aspects of this firearm. So we'll start at the muzzle and work our way back. You notice that this is just a muzzle nut. There is no scoop break or slant break, whatever you want to call it. This is one kind of small, cheap piece that's covering the threads. You get literally no break action out of this. You get no flash suppression, so you're just going to get a big old fireball depending upon your lighting, and literally no help in the recoil department. Okay,
That sucked.
That can actually be changed. It should be noted though that you can't get too big, so you're kind of limited to a slant brake and maybe a few other types, but you have to avoid that gap. And I'll probably just throw in a picture so you don't have to try and stare at it around my face, but the whatever muzzle device you put on there has to be small enough to fit underneath that bayonet lug. So moving on back a whole like centimeter or less is the front sight object here. So this looks a lot different than most front sights. It is just sleeved and pinned onto the barrel, or pressed and pinned onto the barrel, but this one has a great big heavy lug for your bayonet to swing out, and you're probably going to see this happen like 8 more times in the video, so get used to it. This one is a little bit chunky, as you saw me fight with earlier, getting around that cleaning rod. The gun does not ship with a cleaning rod, it should be noted, so that would probably help the function of me swinging it back and forth, but AKs look wrong without it. So big old lug is letting this spring assembly slide forward and lock around it, keeping that firmly in place, firmly enough to stab water jugs. And you can pretty easily, it is knurled for your pleasure to push it back forward and swing it back under. The front sight is hooded in the Chinese fashion, so I'm going to super duper point this at the camera. But you can see that hood over your front sight. So what that's doing is giving you kind of a donut post shape out there in front of you. In some respects that's nice. For close quarter shooting, you can sort of like caveman EOTech this thing and just put the whole circle on your target and you're going to get a hit. It may not be the most accurate hit, but you'll get it. And in some respects it's not great because it is occluding a great deal of your vision, because unlike putting a peep back here somewhere where it's close to your eye and you can still see through it pretty cleanly, you're kind of putting the peep way out there, and it's not a huge difference. It's just slightly different. It's how they did it to protect that sight. So scooching back to your bayonet itself, I've heard this is kind of an issue with other PSA spikers. You can buy this gun without the bayonet, so it would just be their Type 56 lookalike. That's not great. That's probably the only thing I would complain about heavily on this gun, is the fact that it's not quite fit super well on that lug. I'm not sure how they're making those, or if they're machining them, if they've got someone hand fitting or something like that, but it doesn't really rest up inside of your lower handguard. It kind of hangs down. Now, you're going to be gripping that area of the gun, so you're pushing it up into place anyway. It's not that big a deal. It's just sort of a peeve kind of thing. If you're spending $1,000 on a gun, probably don't want it to be rattle trappy right there. You have a ventilated gas tube, which I have no idea if that helps or hinders anything. Looks neat. The wood on this is that like really obnoxious, almost mac and cheese color, because back in the 80s, a lot of the Norincos that were coming in had that obnoxious mac and cheese color to it. So they matched that pretty well, and I believe that's what they were going for. They also sell this gun in a red, like a redwood looking finish that's more of like a, Russian military-esque. And for me, and I don't know if I would do that, I like this kind of aesthetic. My only other major gripe, and you'll see again if you watch that Vietnam run and gun, I'm not a huge fan of the rear sight, and it's not because it's any different than any other rear sight you've ever seen. It's because it is finished in this very bright Cerakote. The problem for me is that because that is so bright, when you catch any light at all, your rear notch goes from, what it should look like, whatever width you want to call that, to being very narrowed by the blurring effect that's happening there from the sunlight just kicking around all over the place, because they finished the sight in the exact same shiny coat as they finished the rest of the gun. I'm sure that's standard. Any other AK I've ever seen, I haven't noticed any huge change on that rear sight, but most other AKs, whether it's like a black paint or a phosphated kind of finish, I just haven't ever really noticed that much glare coming out as I've noticed on this thing. Could be me. Your mileage may vary. Scooching on back. All of the pins and rivets actually look really good on this thing. I did not notice any dimples in the actual receiver or any hammer marks on the rivets themselves. The barrel pin is flush on both sides. Everything looks really clean there. I'll get close-up pictures so you can see all that a little better. You do have a in the white bolt, as you would have seen on pretty much all of the Norinco AKs at the time. They also did a really nice touch with some Chinese characters on the receiver. I don't know that the Norincos had that or not, but it is a very cool look to the gun to have, you know, your full auto setting and semi-auto setting, even though this is only a semi-auto gun, with those Chinese characters to denote that. That could say Kung Pao Chicken for all I know, but I like the look of it. You have a stamped receiver, which at the beginning of the Vietnam War would probably not have been seen all that often. Most of those guns were going to be a milled receiver, kind of like Type 3 style AK. Later would go to a stamped receiver just like the AKM did. So this would be sort of a later model. I think a lot of the Norincos that came into the country were stamped receivers, so that helps out. The safety itself is super loosey-goosey. That's real easy to change, but that's how it came on this rifle. I didn't mess with it for the owner's sake. But that is really, really easy to mess with. So I would like a little bit more tension out of it. Just me. You have a smooth top cover, which is correct for the Chinese AKs of the time. The trigger on this thing is not one of the ALGs like they do on their GF5s and other stuff, but it is not a bad trigger by any stretch. Most AKs actually have decent factory triggers, so you got a little bit of take up, but it's very smooth all the way through, and the brake is, I don't know, somewhere. There's not even really a super discernible wall, and it's probably like a 4-pound trigger, so that's fine. It does what it's supposed to do. I'm not doing any like long-range match shooting with it, and as you can tell, the sights are killing that for me anyway. But you have a wooden pistol grip with sort of a, I'm sure it's laser checkering, not terribly deep, not super grabby. It's there, but it's not like having a Bakelite grip where it's like really angry checkered. So that is what it is. The stock angle is actually kicked down a bit more than what you would see on like a traditional AKM where it's really straight back. Again, this is more like a milled setup where it's kicked down quite a bit. And my only other major complaint about the gun, ain't nowhere to put a cleaning kit, man. Like, I don't know how hard that is to do, but you just have a smooth butt plate. I doubt anyone is real serious about running their AK cleaning kit on their AK. Most people are doing whatever else they're doing. But aesthetically, meh. So you do have a solid cleaning kit. All right, no cleaning kit, butt cover. I should very quickly go ahead and pull those screws because I've heard talk of people saying it's actually a hollowed out stock that would take a cleaning kit. It's just not a trapdoor butt plate. So, hangy awny. Alright, so I unscrewed the butt plate. Oddly enough, it is cleared out for a stinking trapdoor cleaning kit. So why we went with a solid butt plate, I do not know, because I'm sure that is not like just a little bit of work to go through to get that hole in there to take a cleaning kit. Odd choice, PSA. But again, that's all just neither here nor there because most people aren't terribly worried about it. I'm just a nerd and think it would be neat if they did that. So I'm going to put this back on. Alright. So there's our tip to butt stuff. Butt stuff. While shooting this gun, because it has no muzzle brake, anything like that, you are going to have slightly more perceived recoil than if you had a muzzle brake on it, which that makes a lot of sense. I didn't notice that it is any more gassed than any other AK I've ever shot. It is slinging the steel casings because I don't have any AK brass to shoot. Slinging those pretty heavy. Again, not abnormal for an AK. And the drop in the stock, I prefer that over like a Yugo AK where you're sitting like this on the thing. So for me to get on the sights is fairly comfortable. I'm not slammed into the gun at any real extreme. If you wear the big old headphones like with most AKs or rifles in general, it is going to kind of kick them up a little bit. But this is more comfortable to me than if I were using a Yugo AK where you're like smashed down. So that's kind of nice. Again, the trigger is nice enough to be able to rip off multiple rounds fairly quickly. Got a couple of stupid double taps in footage, but overall, I didn't hate it, but it's definitely not a modernized AK. There's not a lot of the creature comforts that people will put on their brand new AKs, but this is meant to fill a kind of a collector void, not so much be like your go-to rifle, man. Like, if I wouldn't use this for that. This is just more of a looks thing. Doesn't really fit the oh crap, the world just ended. Could you use it? Sure. If this is all you had and you had to make it work, cool. Bayonets don't run out of ammo on the zombie noggins, so that's pretty nice. But overall, shoots a lot like an AK. The recoil isn't terrible. The trigger is plenty decent, and with that slight drop in the stock and that Chinese style, you do actually gain a little bit of comfort, at least on your cheek weld. The hooded front sight, like we talked about originally, you can use that to your advantage in very close quarters. Just put the whole circle on the thing and shoot. But not a huge advantage over other standard AKs. Now, one thing I did run into that I will gripe a little bit more about. So that mag that we originally had in it, this is one of the less expensive Korean mags, and it sits in there really nice. The reason I chose it is because it's kind of ugly shiny and fit well with the rest of the gun. So takes that just fine. The gun actually ships with one of the PSA kind of 103 style mags, so odd choice in look, but fits the gun really well. Almost no wobble whatsoever. Front to back's good. Cool. So we kind of did this with the Romanian PSA AK where we ran through a bunch of mags, see what will fit. The day I took this out to shoot at the range, or at least one of the days, I brought my cheapo Croatian mags, and guess what doesn't fit in this thing? I had one Korean mag, and then the Croatians wouldn't fit. So in the drill, I couldn't even do like the reload parts and stuff like that because I literally didn't have another mag that wasn't Croatian. And that's a Korean.
And 3 or 4 of my other guns?
That's a Bulgarian. Anyway, what we're going to do is roll through a whole bunch of different magazines and see what fits and what doesn't. Yes, there's ammo in some of these. That does not mean I'm going to rack the gun and blow a hole in my camera and or my house, so bear with me. But Bulgarian, new production, that fits beautifully. These are really nice mags, and you can actually get them for pretty cheap. The only Magpul AK mag I have is a 20 rounder, but fits excellent. That's actually super tight without being over the top. I have a US Palm, which at some point was like an X-Tech. This one's already been ground on by me, so it better fit. Yep, all good. Looks atrocious. A true Russian Bakelite. Cool. Ooh, maybe. That one's pretty tight. I'm not grinding on any Bakelite mags, though. Okay, Romanian chunk. Good to go. This is a Fake Light Korean mag. Again, also fits good. Actually has steel locking lugs, which is nifty. And then here is the Croatian. It just won't lock, like no matter what I do. So I'm assuming my rear tab is too long, or there's something else about the thing. Can't get it to stay in the gun. So I didn't test any of those other mags pre-video, so that was nice that they all fit of various make and branding. Got a drum. This one is a Romanian backloading drum. we might have our second no fit. Yeah, we're in the same boat as the Croatian, where to get it in, it just won't go home. So no on that guy. And then a Romanian top-loading drum. This one's actually kind of tight in my other guns. I'm never going to get that unlocked, but it did lock. I got it unlocked. Took quite a bit of effort to get it all the way home. So that gives you an idea. I'll speed that up probably and just like give it a check or an X or something in the footage, but gives you an idea that it does work with most mags. Almost every AK I've ever purchased isn't just surefire on every single mag type, because there's not a huge, well, there's not any great standardization for manufacturers. It's not like AR-15s where it's like, yep, it's the same freaking mag because it's Stenag. Every AK mag is just a hair different. So this one takes the lot of them with just a couple exceptions, so that is a good thing. One other quick characteristic of this firearm, if you shoot barricade drills or your range or you yourself have a VTAC set up where you have like the cutout, that can be just slightly awkward. It's not the weirdest thing on earth, but it does kind of present, if you're actually using cover, again, this is not something that you're going to be like super duper relying on for modern defense stuff, I wouldn't think, but that does create a bit of an issue if you're laying the gun on stuff. If you catch that hook in the bayonet where it's just the lug that actually comes around, you can pretty well brace off that. If you don't, you're going to be sliding around on this tube and doing kind of weird stuff, so there's some of that you can see. But again, the rifle shoots pretty well. I didn't have any issues with it firing or anything like that. It's just fitting an older school look that you're not going to want to change. So if you're buying this, you're leaving it like it sits. Yeah, you might put a cheap Chinese sling on it like that, and that's kind of where it's going to stay. So this fits a void if you don't have a Norinco and you don't want to pay $4,000. But other than that, it's not doing anything crazy. I think it's really freaking cool. I would love to buy one and probably will at some point if I get the chance. But thanks again to the coworker that I got to borrow this from. And with all that being said, thanks for watching Triple F Shooting, and we'll see you in the next video.
How much flinch? All the